Hello everyone, I hope all of you out there are having a great day. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leo, and I have a question for you. Can you speak more than one language? I'm sure many of us have at least attempted to learn a second language, but unless you're like one of those polyglots that just absorbs languages like how a sponge absorbs water, you would know that learning a second language is far from easy. It requires a lot of time and dedication, and so for those of us who can't afford to move to a foreign country in order to fully immerse ourselves, our best course of action for learning a second language is to take foreign language classes. Whether they be at the university or high school level, these classes provide us with structure in order to learn our language, and put simply, they also incentivize us to actually learn the language, as, let's face it, none of us want to fail a class. Now, I attend the University of San Francisco, and here most students are required to study a foreign language. But despite the fact that many other universities and even high schools make studying a foreign language a requirement, the US still has the reputation of being a predominantly monolingual society, at least compared to other parts of the world in which knowing more than one language is the norm. In an article published in The Conversation, it was mentioned how only 20% of US students study a second language during their K through 12 education, and only at the time that the article was published, only 7.5% of college students were enrolled in a foreign language course. And let's compare this to Europe. So in an article published in the New York Times, it was mentioned how 92% of European students study a foreign language before going on to pursue higher education. With all of this in mind, it is unsurprisingly the case that college foreign language programs across the country are in a very tentative situation. Both of those articles mentioned how between 2013 and 2016, US colleges cut over 650 foreign language programs. Now, my school, USF, is no stranger to foreign language programs being cut. In a recent article published in our student newspaper, it was mentioned how next semester, Portuguese and Arabic are going to be offered for the last time. Admittedly, USF's Portuguese and Arabic programs are relatively small, and the article even mentions how it's not uncommon for these courses to have only a handful of students enrolled in them. And of course, there are financial and economic reasons behind the cuts. However, I feel that the cuts still reflect a belief that foreign language programs at colleges are disposable. And this belief, of course, goes hand in hand with the American attitude of, why should I learn a second language? Everyone in the world wants to learn English, and English is the hegemonic language of the world. So why should I take the time to learn someone else's language when I can get by with just English? And this is, of course, a very sad belief that a lot of people, whether it be unconsciously or consciously, hold, because there are so many benefits to being bilingual. First, we can look at bilingualism from an economic perspective. In a 2018 journal article, it was found that at the time, there were over 60 million people in the US that spoke a language other than English. That right there is a whole market that needs to be catered towards. Moreover, that same article cited a study which found that bilingual people on average earned $3,800 more than monolingual people. And this factored in educational attainment. And also, bilingualism, of course, promotes cultural awareness. And in light of the recent cuts at USF, a USF assistant professor, Jessica Sorensen, published a piece in Inside Higher Ed in which she argued that bilingualism also promotes global awareness and better understanding of global issues. As she argues, we can talk about foreign conflicts and foreign issues in a language that is foreign to those conflicts and issues, but in doing so, we lose a lot of the nuance that we would have otherwise had if we spoke about those conflicts in a language that was more appropriate. Needless to say, everyone should be bilingual, but with foreign language programs being cut across the country and with people clinging on to the ideology of monolingualism, how is this to be done? In my ideal world, bilingual education would be the norm in this country, so by the time kids have entered kindergarten, they would have already begun to learn a second language. But until this dream of mine becomes a reality, what can universities such as USF do to promote bilingualism? Part of the problem I see with learning a foreign language in a classroom setting is that after you leave the classroom, you can just go back to speaking your native language. In other words, there is a lack of immersion. Now, if you were to have moved to a foreign country, you would of course have to speak that language all the time, and consequently that language becomes hardwired into your brain. So, with that in mind, I propose that the USF foreign language departments create foreign language conversation centers. Essentially, places where students can come together and speak with one another in the language that they are learning. This flyer that I made gets at what these conversation centers are all about, but essentially these centers will hold meetings, and these meetings are meant to be casual and informal, but with that said, they will have some structure to them. So students will come to these meetings and they will be given material to look over. This could be an article that talks about cultural practice in another country. It can also be any form of media, so it might be a film or a video, essentially anything. And students, after examining this, will have time to process it in small groups in which they'll discuss what they learned, what they thought was most interesting about the material that they examined, all of course in the language that they're learning. And the idea behind this is it essentially humanizes the language learning process, and that might seem a little bit strange, but the idea is that when we're learning second languages, we spend so much time studying grammar and syntax, it might begin to feel like what we're doing is strictly an academic endeavor. However, learning a language is of course something that's deeply human, and interestingly, in a 2014 study, it was found that what motivated students to continue learning a foreign language was a desire to learn more about other cultures. And so in looking at material that discusses other cultures and things that are going on around the world, it essentially taps into that motivation. On a side note, it was also found in a 2018 article that a lot of students who have a strong desire to study abroad in a foreign country oftentimes have very little cultural knowledge of that country. So these speaking centers also serve to hopefully increase cultural awareness. Now, some people may feel a little uncomfortable at these conversation centers, and that's honestly understandable. The worst thing that happens when you're practicing a second language is when you forget a word or two here or there, that messes with your train of thought, and all of a sudden you become incapable of speaking the language. Of course, the remedy for this is a strong vocabulary, and people often try to strengthen their vocabulary in their target language by creating flashcards. But paper flashcards are a waste of paper and money. Anki makes paper flashcards obsolete. Anki is a free flashcard app that's easy and intuitive to use. All you have to do is open the app, create a new deck, and suddenly you have the ability to create as many flashcards as your heart desires. So there's no point in waiting. Go and download Anki today. After talking with one of the Spanish professors here at USF, I found out that one of the biggest obstacles that students face here when learning a foreign language is the transition from going from a class that's taught predominantly in their native language to a class that's taught predominantly in their target language. So hopefully these conversation centers can help bridge the gap. Seeing as how USF already offers speaking and writing centers, it only makes sense that we also offer foreign language conversation centers in order to promote bilingualism on our campus. If you're watching this video and if you attend USF and if you're taking a foreign language course, I highly recommend that you reach out either to your professor or another faculty member in your language department and suggest this idea of the creation of conversation centers. USF should be keen on the idea of promoting learning outside of the classroom, and conversation centers only serve to enrich our experience here at USF.